midnight screams.
I work the night shift at a grocery store. They left me a strange set of rules. I saw the job posting 2 weeks ago. Night guard wanted at West Supermarket in Benja. Shift is 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., $21 an hour. It struck me as odd from the start. What kind of grocery store needs security after it's closed? Was the crime here really that bad? But I needed the money. Badly. And 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I was starting my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I sort of understood why they'd need a night guard. The store was on the edge of a decaying strip mall. Massive signs on the glass doors read sale, but judging by the dust-caked glass and flickering lampposts, it looked like nobody had cared about the place for years. I parked near the front entrance. As I approached the building, a woman hurried out of the store. "You're Aaron, right?" she said, out of breath. "The night guard? That's me. Clive left instructions for you. I put them on the conveyor belt at checkout 1. She gave a curt nod, then circled around me, heading for the only other car in the lot. "Oh, thanks. Be friendly," a voice in my head reminded me. "She's your new co-worker." I turned back. "Hey, what's your name?" But she was already scrambling into her car, the door slamming shut. The car reversed out of its spot, and then she was gone. So much for new friends. I turned back to the store. The parking lot was now completely empty, and the nearest streetlight blinked with a strange, erratic rhythm. A cold wind blew through, sending a crumpled paper bag skittering across the asphalt. Might as well get this over with. I walked into the store. The glass doors hissed open, and I stepped inside. Despite its rundown exterior, the inside was decent enough. Bright fluorescent lights hummed from the ceiling. Jazz music drifted from hidden speakers. I went to checkout 1, where a folded piece of paper was waiting for me. I opened it and read, "To Aaron, welcome to the West family. We truly hope you enjoy your first shift. To assist you, we've compiled a list of rules to make your shift as easy as freshly baked apple pie. As the night guard, you must patrol the store every half hour to ensure all is well. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room at the back of the store monitoring the security cameras. Do not enter aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. If you hear knocking coming from inside the freezers in the frozen food section, ignore it. If you see a shopping cart that has not been put away, please return it to the cart corral at the front of the store immediately. Do not be alarmed if you see a pool of blood in the meat section. The packages sometimes leak. Simply go to the supply closet for a mop and bucket to clean it. However, do not step in the blood or touch it in any way. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and remain there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in. Do not look her in the eyes. The music played in the store is a pre-recorded instrumental jazz album. If the music stops, immediately go to the break room and remain there until it resumes. Under no circumstances are you to end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again, have a wonderful shift. Sincerely, Clive. I stared at the rules, reading them again slowly. They were bizarre. A woman in the store. Avoid aisle 7? I'd never gotten instructions like these, not even when I was a bouncer at a club in the bad part of town. Maybe this was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow absurd instructions. I glanced up at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling, watching me. Okay then, challenge accepted. I checked the time on my phone. 12:06. Might as well do the first patrol before I settled in. It was strange, walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. All the bread and muffins had been put away somewhere. Opaque white plastic sheets were pulled down over the produce section, keeping the cold in. When I reached the back of the store, I turned right into the meat section. The meat coolers were also covered with plastic sheets. I saw glimpses of red through the gaps, huge cuts of ribeye and sirloin, massive hunks of meat still on the bone. I quickly looked away. I wasn't a vegetarian, but I didn't like looking at raw meat. I moved on to the aisles. Aisle 3. Pasta and sauce, stacked neatly on gleaming shelves under the fluorescent lights. Aisle 4. Cookies and snacks. Aisle 5. Aisle 6. Right, no looking at aisle 7. I forced my eyes to the floor. Yeah, it seemed silly, but they told me not to look. In case they were reviewing the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I'd follow every rule. I continued deeper into the store. A few minutes later, I found the break room. A nondescript brown door with a small, square window cut into it. I made a mental note of its location for later. As soon as I finished this first patrol, I was going to get my laptop out and finish watching Friday the 13th Part 4. And then I reached the west side of the store, the frozen section. I entered an aisle that led toward the front doors. That's when I saw it. A shopping cart, parked haphazardly in the middle of the aisle. I let out a breath of air. Of all the rules, this one annoyed me the most. I was hired as security, not a cleanup crew. Wasn't it the staff's job to put all the carts away before closing? Sighing, I started pushing the cart toward the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly beneath my hands. The smooth jazz purred in my ears. I rounded the corner of the counter and passed through the checkout area, heading for the front doors. That's when I heard it. A tiny sound, almost inaudible over the jazz. I stopped, straining to listen. A few seconds of silence passed, and then I heard it again. It sounded like someone crying. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was no one here. The doors had been locked the whole time, unless a customer had been accidentally locked in after closing. Maybe the employee I saw in the parking lot had been careless and locked the doors before they could get out. "Hello?" I called out. A long, drawn-out sob was the only reply. My heart sank. It sounded like a woman's voice, or maybe a child's. "I'm coming!" I shouted, breaking into a run. "Where are you?" They didn't answer, just kept crying. I ran desperately toward the sound, calling out reassurances that everything was going to be okay. But then I stopped, dead in my tracks. The sound, it was coming from aisle 7. Do not enter aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. The rules were very clear about that. I stopped just before the aisle, next to a display of mayonnaise, and carefully positioned myself out of sight. "I'm going to help you," I called out. "Can you tell me what happened?" They finally spoke, but not to answer my question. "Help! Help me!" The voice was shaky through the sobs. "Please, please help me. I wanted to step into that aisle. One of my feet was already lifting off the floor, ready to run in and comfort them. But something held me back. A gut feeling, an alarm bell clanging in my head. Of all the aisles, why was this person in aisle 7? Besides, they were safe. They were in an empty grocery store with me. This wasn't some dark alley in the middle of the night. "Come out of the aisle," I called, my voice shaking a little. "Then I can help you." "Please," the voice replied. "Help me." This was ridiculous. Someone was clearly trapped after hours, and they were scared. I should just go in there and help them get home. But another part of me, a primal survivalist part, was screaming at me not to move. "Is there anyone I can call?" I tried. "Your parents? Family? The police? Help me," the voice pleaded again. The way they said "help me" was identical every time. There was a slight pause at the beginning, an emphasis on the word "me." It sounded like a recording or something AI generated, playing on a loop. It wasn't natural. "Come out of the aisle," I shouted. "Come out, and I will help you." The sobs grew louder, more frequent, frantic. "Help me," the voice begged again, with a desperate tone that sent a chill down my spine. I stood there, pressed against the mayonnaise display, listening to them cry as my stomach churned. As unnatural as it sounded, I considered calling the police. They would know what to do, but I'd left my phone in my backpack at checkout 1, and to get it, I'd have to cross aisle 7. The rules said nothing about walking past aisle 7, just that I couldn't enter it or look down it. I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was a person who needed help? A kid who'd sprained their ankle and couldn't get up? "Don't worry, I'm going to get my phone and call the police," I yelled. Then I took a deep breath and crossed the threshold of aisle 7, heading toward the checkouts. The second my foot crossed the line, the crying stopped. Just like that. One moment, intense sobbing. The next, complete silence, like someone had flipped a switch. Then the footsteps started. Heavy, pounding footsteps. Someone sprinting down the aisle. Definitely not a child. And they were coming right for me. My heart fell through the floor. It was a trap. They were coming to kill me, and I was going to die here. But the moment I was clear of the aisle, the sound stopped. All I could hear was the smooth jazz trickling from the overhead speakers. I sprinted for the break room, completely forgetting about the cart I was supposed to put away. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been covered from the inside with cardboard. The only light source was the computer monitor on the desk, displaying feeds from the security cameras. I cycled through the video feeds quickly, noticing that none of them were pointed at aisle 7. It seemed the cameras were deliberately placed to avoid that area. After scanning the grainy, black and white feeds for any sign of an intruder, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was almost 12:30. Time for the next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe in here, locked away in this little room. But I also knew I wouldn't be safe if I didn't follow the rules. I shuddered to imagine what might have happened if I had gone into aisle 7, if I hadn't listened. I forced myself out of the chair and toward the door. The store was completely quiet, no frantic sobs or pounding footsteps. I started my patrol from the back of the store, heading up aisle 17. Canned goods gleamed on the shelves as I passed. But on closer inspection, I didn't recognize any of the brand names. No Chef Boyardee, ravioli, or Green Giant. Just generic, plainly labeled cans. Stew. In fact, the entire aisle was just stew. The same can, over and over again. I reached the end of the aisle and turned right toward the front of the store, and that's when I realized I'd broken one of the rules. The cart. I hadn't put it away. It wasn't where I left it. Instead of being abandoned near aisle 7, it was now parked neatly beside a checkout counter, as if some phantom person was waiting in line to pay. I froze for a few seconds, my hand hovering over the handle. Then I grabbed it and pushed it toward the exit. Outside, the parking lot was shrouded in thick darkness. Not a single lamppost was lit. The cart corral is just a few steps from the door, I told myself. In and out, it'll only take a second. I did it as fast as I could. I ran out into the darkness, shoved the cart into the row, and sprinted back inside. Then I shut and locked the door. Okay, not so bad, I told myself, letting out a breath. For a moment, I just enjoyed the peace of the store, the quiet, the safety of being locked inside with no one else. But then I froze. The quiet. Oh no, the jazz had stopped. How long had it been off? I'd been so worried about the cart I hadn't even noticed. I bolted toward the back of the store. Cookies and snacks blurred past me as I ran. Then I hooked a right and threw myself into the break room. I pulled out the list of rules and read it again. Under no circumstances are you to end your shift early. Why would Clive have written that? Was it just to make sure no one walked off the job? Or would some horrible fate befall me if I left early? Because I really wanted to leave, I opened my backpack, pulled out the soda I'd brought, cracked it open, and took a sip. Then I started cycling through the security feeds. 5 hours to go. The next 4 patrols went by fairly smoothly. The rules didn't specify how long the patrols had to be, so every 30 minutes, I did a lap around the store as fast as I could. The whole thing took about a minute, and for the other 29 minutes, I locked myself back in the break room. On my second patrol, as I ran past the frozen section, I heard the knocking. It started as a light tapping on the glass, then grew louder, like someone was slamming their palms against the freezer door. As per the rules, I ignored it. I just kept running until I was safely back in the break room. On my last patrol, the jazz music stopped again. I immediately changed course and sprinted back to the break room as the silence rang in my ears. And now, here I was again. With 3 hours to go, I watched the clock on my phone, the seconds slowly ticking toward 3 a.m. I stood up, trying to shake the tension out of my body, getting ready to run. I used to be a runner in high school, but I'd let myself go in the last 10 years. My last patrol had left me, breathless, my legs aching. My hand was on the doorknob, my heart hammering in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I threw open the door and sprinted out into the store. But I didn't get far, because on the floor was a massive pool of blood. I stopped short, the air knocked out of my lungs. I stood frozen, staring at the pool glistening under the fluorescent lights. The rules said I had to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed hard and rushed to the supply closet, got the mop and bucket, and started cleaning as fast as I could. It was messy work. I slid the mop through the pool, then dipped it in the bucket. over and over. The soapy water in the bucket turned red. A few times it sloshed, nearly splashing me, but I got it done. I cleaned it up without touching a drop. Unfortunately, by the time I was finished, the clock read 3:27. It was time for my next patrol. I was too tired to run, so I just walked briskly around the store. I passed the frozen section, where I now noticed handprints on the glass doors. Handprints of all sizes, tilted and smeared, but their dimensions were wrong. The fingers were too long, too thin. I looked away and kept going. 2.5 hours left. My footsteps echoed on the linoleum. The jazz music was starting to grate on me. I was sure I had heard the same saxophone riff repeat at least 20 times. It made me want to punch something. Sighing, I continued past the produce section, walking quickly through the aisles. Then I stopped. Something had caught my eye in one of the aisles. I backed up and took a closer look. There was someone standing in aisle 9. A woman. She was wearing a blue linen dress and black high heels. Long black hair cascaded down her back, nearly to her waist. Her back was to me, and she stood perfectly still, her pale white arms hanging at her sides. In her hands, she held a basket filled to the brim with raw meat. The rule flashed in my head. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not look her in the eyes. I slowly backed away, trying to be as quiet as possible. Then I turned down the next aisle over, heading for the break room. Click, click, click. The sound of her heels echoed on the linoleum. I picked up my pace, power walking toward the break room. But then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me. They were coming from ahead of me. I looked down at the floor, just in time to see 2 glossy black heels step into the aisle. I kept my eyes glued to the ground. Don't look her in the eyes. Don't look her in the eyes. The words repeated in my head. But I had to get to the break room, and she was standing in my way. All I could see were the shiny heels and the little drops of blood leaking from the packages of meat in her basket, speckling the floor. I backed away. It was the only direction I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful not to look up. But she followed me. Click, click. With every step I took, I saw another glossy black heel appear, attached to a slender, pale white calf, mirroring my own. I walked faster. So did she. Click, click, click. I spun around and broke into a run. Click, click, click. I ran randomly down an aisle and made a break for the break room. But halfway down the aisle, I stopped. There was a shopping cart blocking the middle of the aisle. Not just one, but many, stacked on top of each other in a teetering tower almost as tall as the shelves. I was trapped. I backed away, heart pounding. Click. The slow, steady footsteps approached me, as slow as a cat stalking its prey. I took a chance, turned, and ran back out into the open space, then darted into the next aisle over. No, no, no. I knew instantly. A heap of tattered gray fabric and sickly blue-tinged skin lay crumpled on the floor. The person, or rather the creature, was curled up like a crying child, but it was clearly not human at all, with strange protrusions, bent limbs, and no head whatsoever. I was in aisle 7. I immediately turned back. But before I could get far, the creature unfurled and started to move toward me. I screamed, turning on my heel and sprinting down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end unscathed. I took a sharp left, sprinting for the break room. Almost there. Almost there. My hand closed around the doorknob. I twisted it and threw myself inside, collapsing into the chair, gasping for breath. I took a deep, shuddering breath, staring at the locked door. Was I really safe in here? The rules never actually said I would be. Maybe this just lowered my chances of being killed. My gaze shifted to the security monitor on the desk. The camera was pointed at the center of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty. No sign of the woman. I switched to the next camera. Produce was empty. I clicked to another one. I gasped. There she was, right in front of the break room door. She was as still as a photograph, except for the thin stream of blood dripping from the packages in her basket onto the floor. I swallowed and looked away from the monitor, toward the door. My heart leaped into my throat when I saw her shadow beneath the crack. Go away. Please, go away. I prayed in my head. The shadow of her head tilted on the frame, as if she were contemplating her next move. Now I understood why the window was covered. I forced myself to look away and back at the monitor. She was still there, but there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy black and white image, trying to figure out what it was. It was hard to... My eyes landed on her heels. I realized they were pointing forward, but I was still looking at the back of her head. Her long, dark hair cascaded down to her waist. Either her hair was completely covering her face, or her head was twisted completely backward. It took about 20 minutes for her to start moving away from the door. I wasn't sure if it was the low frame rate of these cheap cameras, but her movements looked jerky, her body lurching with every step. Watching her move made me feel sick. When she disappeared from the screen, I breathed a sigh of relief. My limbs felt shaky and weak. Okay, think. The rule said to wait until she leaves. All I had to do was watch the camera on the main entrance. Once I saw her leave the store, I'd be safe. After a few minutes of just sitting there, waiting for my heart rate to return to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key, switching to the next cam, then the next, and the next, looking for the camera that filmed the front of the store. No, her face filled the screen. Her eyes terrified me. They were pure white, no pupils, no irises, just pale white eyes with a spiderweb of yellow veins all over them. I screamed and fell backward in my chair. Then I squeezed my eyes shut. The rule said not to look her in the eyes. Did this count? Through a scream? I let out a shaky, terrified moan, covering my face with my hands, my whole body trembling. When I finally peeked through my fingers, I saw her. She was scurrying down the wall, away from the ceiling camera, like a spider. Then she scrambled through the glass doors and out into the night. She was gone. I was safe. Or as safe as I could be in this godforsaken store. I glanced at the clock. 3:58 a.m. Time for a patrol. I really didn't want to go, but I forced myself to open the door and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw the shopping carts stacked in their teetering towers, heard the hands slapping against the freezer doors, saw the little flecks of blood on the gleaming linoleum where she had stalked me. And then, a minute later, I was done. I locked myself in the break room, and for the first time in years, I broke down and sobbed. The rest of the patrols passed without incident, though I still heard the crying from aisle 7 and the banging from the freezer. And then, it was time. 6 a.m. My heart soared as I saw the pinkish sky of dawn through the glass doors. I was safe. I was free. As I looked out at the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in, tired morning shift workers with coffee in their hands, making their way toward me. The second the first person walked in, I bolted from the store, jumped into my car, and sped away as fast as I could. I had never felt so relieved, so happy. I felt like a new man. All my problems, even my financial ones, seemed to pale in comparison to what I'd just been through. As I turned onto the main road, I rolled down my windows and turned on the radio. But it wasn't my usual classic rock station that came through the speakers. Instead, I heard a jaunty saxophone tune, and as I listened to that same horrible, looping melody, I realized my nights as a guard for Westmart might not be over after all.